Hi everyone, this is Mukesh Otwani once again from learn-automation.com. So guys, in the previous session we have discussed about how we can send payload as a string, right? Now this is one of the most important topics when it comes to API testing called serialization. So when it comes to sending a big payload, we always talk about serialization and deserialization. So let's quickly see what exactly is in this video. So we'll start with what is serialization. What is serialization in rest assured, which will also known as object mapping. And once you understand this object mapping concept, then we'll start with the POJO concept, so which is plain old Java objects. And once you understand the POJO concept, we'll convert our complete payload as an object, and we will be using in our rest assured. So not only rest assured guys, if you're using any other client as well, let's say HTTP client or any other library, same concept will be applicable. Okay, so it's not only for the API testing. If you're working as a developer and you want to communicate with the different systems as well, so you can combine all the data as an object, and you can uh, do the serialization and deserialization, and you can play with the data. So let's get started. Object mapping. So REST assured also supports mapping Java objects to and fro from JSON and XML. It means whatever data or whatever payload you have, you can convert that payload into object. Okay, that is called serialization and deserialization. So when you say deserialization, it means from object you can capture the payload. Okay, I will repeat again. Let's say you have a lengthy payload, let's say JSON or XML. If that payload you're converting into object, it's a normal Java object, then it will known as serialization. But when you do the reverse process, let's say you have an object, and from that object you want to take out the payload in a form of JSON XML, that is known as deserialization. Okay, so they have given one example as well how you can serialize your payload. So they have only taken one field. I will be taking a complex payload, and I will show you how you can convert into a JSON payload. Sorry, just JSON payload to an object. So just to start, I will show you. Let's say you have one small payload. Let's say message. Message is nothing but an object. So they created a class, they created a variable, and for that variable they have created a getter setter method. So this is nothing but a main variable. So whenever you have to send this payload, you need to use one setter method. So whatever method you will set, sorry, whatever data you will set, that will be stored in this variable, okay, which is nothing but an object here, and you will be passing that particular object as a payload. This is just one basic example they have given. Let me show you from scratch, then you will understand how we create object, okay, from a JSON payload. So in order to do that, let me switch back to Eclipse and let me show you the previous example which we covered. So this was our previous program where we did the cookies based authentication and we were sending this payload. Can you see that? What we did, we converted this payload into a string, and we have sent this payload as a string. But right now if you go back and if you see, whenever you have to send payload like this, it's very easy because it's a very small payload. But let's consider a scenario where you have a big payload and you cannot convert that into string. You can convert, but again it's a very tedious task. You need to add so many non-escape characters. So whenever you have big payload or a lengthy payload or complex payload, it is always recommended that you should send payload as an object, or you should send the payload as a JSON file. So I will show you how you can convert into an object. So let's consider this example. I need the payload in this format, right? So how can I do that? Let me go back to Eclipse. I will use the same example guys, and I will show you. So in order to create a payload, okay, let me create a first class, and you can see this is the payload I need. So if you see the outer part, okay, let me show you one good part, and I will say JSON viewer. So this is one JSON viewer online which you will get when you just do the copy paste here, and if you click on viewer, can you see the first part called fields? When you open this, we have one summary, one description, and again we have one small, okay, nested object. Okay, so now when you talk about object mapping, everything is an object now. So you can see we have two fields. One is summary, one is a description, which is coming as a one separate field. But we have two few fields which is inside another object. So we have one project object and we have another issue type object. So we need to first of all create one fields. Okay, inside that fields we have to provide summary and description. Okay, or maybe you can do in a reverse way. First we will create issue type. Okay, so what is this issue type? In the issue type, if you see, what we have, only one field called name, right? So I'm creating everything as a class. Just allow me a moment. In few minutes I will explain you why we are creating all this, but let me create a payload like this through object mapping. Now this is also known as POJO, okay, plain old Java object. So it is a kind of data structure, guys, where we will have few fields, depends on the payload, and for each payload we will have the getter setter methods. That is our main intention. So if you ask me that if I have to send you a data called name, I will send you name as a string. But if I have to send my details like my name, my phone number, my email address, everything. Now it's a mix of fields, right? I cannot send you as a string separately as an integer or as a double. I need to create a data structure or maybe one object, and I will send you as an object. That object will include my name, phone number, everything. So that will known as serialization and deserialization. So this is what exactly we are going to do now. Allow me a moment, and within a few minutes you will understand everything. So first thing which we need to understand is we need a field. Okay, first of all we are creating two inner objects. One is issue type. So for this we need one uh, field called name. So I will say string name. That's all. Now every field or every variable which I will take will have a getter setter method. Okay, so in order to get getter setter, either you can write getter setter method by own, otherwise you can just surround this piece of code, and when you go to this source, and can you see this part, getter setter method, you need to select the field, okay, and just say getter setter. It will automatically create one method called getName, which will return the name which is set to this particular variable. SetName is a method which will expect a input parameter as a name, and it will assign to this particular variable. Okay, now we also need one constructor. Okay, so this constructor will get this particular name from a different class. So let me create one constructor. Constructor have the same name as class name. Now this will accept a name, and this will also assign the name. So this will be coming from the different class when we will create the complete payload. For the time being, this is just one inner payload which we are creating for issue type, which has only one field called name. Clear? Now second thing which we need is this also. We also need one project which will include one particular key, right? That key is also a string we will take. Same thing we will do, we will just go ahead and create a separate class. This class I will give as projects, and here I will take one variable called key. and this also I will create getter setter. So I will go to source, I will create a getter setter method, and that's all. Now this key is the main field name which will be coming in the payload. Okay, so if you give here Mukesh, it will come here as a Mukesh. So make sure you give this exact same. Now we also need constructor, right? So I will say public constructor. This will expect a key, and this will assign to the key which we have created. So like this is a keyword which is referring to this particular variable. Clear? So now we have project, which is which includes the key. We also have issue type, which includes the name. Now what else we need? Now we need the main part called fields. Now this field includes project, issue type, and two more string variables. So what we will do, we'll create another class. Let me close all. Let me create a separate class. This class I will give as let's give fields, or maybe give payload, final payload. So in this payload, whatever fields we have, first of all we need to include. So let's include the summary, right? Then we need description. That is also I will give as a description. Now the main part. So guys, this was the string, but what about these two which we created? We need to give which type of data we have. So summary was a string type, description was string type, but now we have two more classes, right? One is issue type. So what is the name, or what is the variable you have to give? Variable you have to give just like this, whatever field name you want. We need issue type, right? Just give like exactly same, because this is what it will come in the payload. Another thing which we need is this project, right? So I will say projects, so this should match with the exact key which you want. So we want project as a key, so this is the key. Issue type is a key, and these two. So this is actually again a separate object that we will see. Now for these two and for these two, you also need again getter setter methods, right? So again you can just select this piece of code, say surround with, go to source and say getter setter method, and select all and create getter setter method. So this is your okay, let me keep on the top. So we have get summary, set description, get description, issue type, and the project type. Now this data, now this is almost ready to accept the payload. We also need constructor for this payload class as well, right? So I will say public payload. Okay, now what details you want? First of all, I need summary, guys, right? Because this is what the summary I need. So I will say summary. Then I need description, so I will accept description. Then I need issue type. Issue type is this, and let's say this issue. And the last thing, I need project, right? So I will give type as a projects, and I will give this as a PRO. Just give any name. Now this is the four fields which I will expect, and I will assign to the respective variables. Now I will say this dot summary, whatever summary I will get, we will assign to this summary. Then we'll say this dot description equal to description which you will get. Let me give as a description. And now this time this dot issue type equal to issue, whatever issue I will get I will assign to this variable, and finally projects. So now guys, we have a payload. This is the main class which will generate the payload. This has two fields, which is summary description like this. It has two objects, one is project, one is issue type, which is this. Inside issue type we have as one variable called name field, okay, and under project we have one field which is key. Now guys, this is everything is done till this level, but we also need the final field, right? This is the main part which will generate the complete field for us. Now this is very interesting guys. What we need to do, we need to again create a final class. Okay, this class I will give as fields. What this field accept? This field accepts, sorry, this field only accept the complete payload, right? So what will be the variable? Everything is under payload, right? So this will only accept a payload, okay, and what should be the name? I will give fields. You can see this part, exactly same we have to give. Now for this also we need getter setter method, so just surround this and say source getter setter method, and we also need a constructor. So public fields, and this will accept payload, let's say, and this will assign to the fields. This is what the main part. Now can you see, just for this payload we created 4 classes, because fields is the main thing which will accept everything as a payload, right? Now we can send the data to this particular API. Okay, now guys, again, if you don't know this part which we did, please go watch my previous session where we discussed everything already, how to create a Jira ticket or task via API. Okay, so before jumping into final payload, let's see how exactly it will look like when we create this as an object. Okay, so in order to demonstrate, I will create a separate class, and this I will say final payload. I'm just giving I'm just using this class as a demo purpose, so I will delete this. You can give any name. I'm just giving final payload. So now if you talk about payload, finally we have this payload. So we created issue type, so let's create one object of issue type. So I will say issue type issue equal to new issue type. You can give any issue. So by default we need to provide task as per the API. If you give task, then only it will create task in my Jira. Now let's say I want to see this part only. I don't want to see the full payload. I just want to see how it will look like when I will send this as an object. Now in order to, right now it is just an object, so the moment you pass this task, it will call the constructor. In the constructor we are passing the task, and this field will initialize with the task. That's all. Now if I want to see this, we need to take the help of one separate class called object mapper. So can you see this? We have a separate class which will do your task, and it will convert everything into an object. So we use this class. Let's say I will create object obj map equal to new object mapper. As the name says object mapper, it will map. So if you just put if you want to see the description, let it download the source code and the documentation. Yeah, now if you just type or just put mouser, and you can see. So what it will do, it will construct the default JSON factory as necessary, and it will create complete payload. Now let's do one thing. Let's call one of the method and see. So this is the object which we created. Now we have one method called writer with default pretty printer. So whatever object you will pass, okay, it will serialize that and it will show you in a pretty format. When I say pretty format, it will show you in a proper JSON format. Now we have a separate method called write value as string. So whatever object we will pass, okay, so we are going to pass one object called issue, right? It will convert into string. Now if you put mouse over, it is giving some JSON processing exception. So you can handle this, or you can just, for the timing, you can just throw. If you put mouse over now, it is going to return one string. So I will say my data, and finally if you want to see, just print this and you will see how this object is getting converted into JSON. Let's run this. So this object mapper is doing the real task. Okay, it is converting your object into proper JSON. So right now we did only one task part and it converted into JSON. So this is the code, final code which we have to deal. Now let's complete the payload. So we also have another class which we created called projects, right? This. So projects, project equal to new projects. Now this project actually need the key. So the key is this, which is rest. So now this or this, right now you cannot pass project now, because issue, if you pass, it will create your payload with issue. If you pass as a project, it will create JSON with project. But I need the complete payload, right, with everything. For that we created another class called payload class. We also need now payload class. So I will say payload p equal to new payload. You can give any name, guys. I'm just giving some dummy name. So when I create object of payload, it is asking give me a description, give me summary. Issue, which is nothing but this object which we created, we are passing now. And for project, this is the project which we are passing now. So this is, let's say I give some name demo1 description. I will say demo1 description. So this is the final p object. If you want to see how it will look, you just pass p here and just run this now. We got the payload, but this payload is incomplete. Why? Because we also need a key field, right, which is, sorry, field which is missing. We got summary, we got description, issue type, everything, but still field is missing. For that we also created another class, right? That class was fields. The moment you say fields f equal to new field, it is expecting a payload, and we have good now. So this f, if you pass, which is nothing but a field payload, it is going to convert this object into a JSON payload. Awesome. This was our main task. So guys, make sure whatever key you want to pass, sorry, this is actually key value pair, right? So if you want to pass key here, make sure you give the exact name as a variable. I hope you understood now how to create a payload, right? Because you cannot pass multiple objects. So what we did, we created first of all separate classes for inner objects. So these two classes we created for inner objects. Then we created final payload, okay, and the fields to attach this payload, and finally we are going to pass this particular payload, which is nothing but f. This is clear, guys. Now what we need to do, we need to use this f object while sending the data. Now for this I will go back to my previous program where we did, like, we actually passed complete payload here. If you just see this part, we were sending payload like this, which is not a good approach at all. So in spite of passing like this, if you just check, rest assured also accept object. This is what we did right now. Now since we have already seen how we can generate the final payload, so let's do one thing. Let's copy paste this particular payload here. Okay, so what we did just now, whatever payload we created, we are just going to pass this particular object into this body. Guys, this is like I'm just copy pasting right now, but when it comes to actual framework part, we have to do little efficiently so that we should not mess up everything into the main test case. We just need to pass this f object that we created as a payload or as an object, and it will send as a complete JSON internally. Now let's do one thing. When you do control space, this body also accept object. Okay, so let's pass the object, guys. So the object which we created is the f. That's all. Now let's run this code and see how it works. As this is the previous code, guys, where I have just written a small code which sends the username password. Okay, and first of all it will generate one access token or JSON ID. Once we get the JSON ID, we will set as a cookie, and that cookie we will be using in our subsequent calls. And now this is nothing but a payload which we are passing. Now let's run this and see. Run as test-ng test. So it will go ahead and hit the API and it will create a task. That task ID also we will get in the response. So you can see it created one task. This is the URL. Okay, this is actually the task ID, which is 10008, and this is the key rest -9. So okay, so you can see how easy it is when it comes to sending payload as an object. So let me quickly summarize what exactly we did so that at least you will have clear idea. First, we created one class. This class was the issue type. Okay, where we created only one key. Then we created another class, project type, which also had only one key. When I say key, it means it had only one field. Then we created another class which had two separate keys. Okay, one was, okay, first of all let me give this name as a project. Not this project, this was the payload. So this was the class and it had two fields. One was summary and one was description. So this was the two separate string. Apart from that, we also had, we assigned project and issue type here. So this was the final class which was generating payload. We also need one class which was nothing but the final class called fields. So in this fields class we have taken this object. Okay, sorry guys, I'm very bad in the drawing. And finally, once we create object, that object we are going to pass into the body. So this is just one example. The more fields you have, the more variables you need to create with getter setter methods, and you need to pass the data accordingly. Okay, so this is how we can pass the object as a payload. Okay, and this is also known as serialization. We have reverse process called deserialization. This is a reverse process exactly. So when you get everything as an object and you need to capture the field from that object. Okay guys, that's all I have from my side. If you have any issue or doubt, let me know in the comment section. And if you like this video, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video. Have a nice day. Bye bye.